Everyone, I'm Jen T with ARINGO, and today we're going to talk about letters of recommendation and how to get a strong one. So, like a cup of coffee, you want your recommendation letter to be strong. And the best way to do this is to have your recommender be familiar with your profile and be able to answer the questions that an MBA letter of recommendation is asking. So, when we look at this, the typical questions that they're going to ask is, how would you rate this? You're going to be a student, but how would you rate this candidate on their leadership skills, their technical expertise, their teamwork, as well as their leadership, right? So, with all of that in mind, they will also ask for them to rate you in general, but also in comparison to your peers. So, when you're selecting a recommender, you want to find somebody who can actually answer those questions about you. Schools typically don't actually care as much about the title of the person who's writing the letter of recommendation. They're more focused on the quality of what they can provide. So it's easy to want to name drop and be like, oh, I have the CEO of my company writing the letter. But if they don't know much about you, it'll be hard for them to write anything. And you may either end up with a very short letter of recommendation or a very bland letter of recommendation that doesn't add anything to your profile or candidacy. So, what I recommend is finding either somebody who is your immediate supervisor or maybe one or two levels removed, depending on your work, maybe a product or a project manager or a mentor. And this can be somebody from your current company or from your past company. Typically, most schools are going to be looking for 1 to 2 letters of recommendation. And so, depending on the longevity of your experience at different companies, you may choose somebody from a past company. Now, a couple of caveats to this is that sometimes candidates will feel that their asking for a letter of recommendation from their current employer could cause some problems. It may prevent them from getting promotions or may put them on the short list or maybe a layoff or something like that. So, if you feel that it will jeopardize your job, you do not have to ask your current employer for a letter of recommendation. You can use previous bosses from other companies or even bosses that have left the company that you feel confident in asking them to write the letter of recommendation. Um, Typically, if you're not using your current employer as a recommender, the school in their application will ask you to explain why you're not using your current supervisor or employer. Beyond that, now it's time to actually ask the recommender for the recommendation after you've selected them. And so sometimes it's, again, like if they know about you and they've been part of your process, they maybe know that you're interested in pursuing an MBA. So it won't be coming out of the blue to say like, hey, would you write the recommendation letter for me? And then I typically recommend that you try to invite them out to coffee or tea or something, or ask if, like, hey, can we have a quick meeting? I want to go over a little bit about my background beyond what you know about me in this role so that you have a well rounded perception of who I am and why I want to do the MBA and what I've accomplished, maybe in other roles or other companies. And so that's the time when you would share with your resume and maybe give them some, you know, a little bit more about your goals and how they can kind of answer the questions. Now, sometimes we decide that we want to pursue an MBA with very short notice, and you need to get that letter of recommendation within like a month. And so, the way that I usually have candidates prepare their recommender in this way in a short amount of time is kind of say, hey, so and so from this department, or maybe you and I talked about it before about maybe potentially pursuing an MBA. And I thought maybe I'd throw my hat in the ring this year and I'm just going to see what happens. I'm not sure if it's actually going to happen or not, but I think I might try it. And then a couple weeks later, come back and then say, hey, I actually worked on my application and was wondering if you could give me a letter of recommendation. And then, again, go through that whole education and sharing a bit about you and your background with them before they actually write the letter. Now, a couple of other caveats to this is that absolutely sometimes your employer or your recommender will say, yeah, I'll write the letter of recommendation. Maybe not. You write it and then I'll submit it. No, that's kind of a big no-no in the scheme of what MBA programs are looking for, and it could go against um, their ethical, uh, their ethics policy. So, with that being said, you can help your letter recommender. You can give them a cheat sheet, or maybe say, "I'll do kind of a first draft for you to review and decide how to move forward." But please note that the MBA admissions committees are going to be looking at the IP address that the letter of recommendation was submitted from. So if you submit both letters of recommendation from your computer, they'll see those IP addresses. So you do want them to be submitted from your recommender's IP address and have two separate IP addresses for the two recommenders, so not from the same computer. The other thing that you should know when you're filling out the application form is sometimes they'll ask you if you waive your rights to see the letter of recommendation. You should absolutely check that box because sometimes if you're a recommender and you see that so and so has not waived their rights to be able to see this, it means that you've just told the admissions committee and your recommender, hey, if I am not admitted, I'm going to go back and want to see this letter and know what you said about me. And then they feel like they can't be honest when they were always going to be honest and write something positive, but they feel even weirder about it. So my recommendation, and this is totally up to you, but I would definitely waive your right because then it helps with everybody feeling that things are being submitted in confidence and that they can give a true, accurate statement about who you are and what you have to contribute to these MBA programs. So if you think you need help with selecting a recommender or having that conversation with a recommender, let me know. Just reach out and we can talk about your situation and how to best prepare for this part of the application.